Well, there is no doubt this has been a big topic. Uh, it kind of hit the church pretty quickly out of nowhere. We were not only dealing with the same sex topic, and then transgenderism just kind of came up out of nowhere, boom. And of course, culture's changing so fast. Everything's changing so fast. So this kind of arose very quickly, and it's something that has become more prevalent and prominent. And so, yeah, definitely. I would say that where I'm at in college campuses, I see a lot more transgender students than I used to. It's very common. I see many, many more transgender students these days, and it's mostly the male to the female, the male wanting to be a female. I would say that's the predominant one I see. Could be different somewhere else, but I'm just saying where I am. That's what I see. Anyway, there's no way, once again, we're going to cover everything about this tonight. If you want to get some of these resources here, there's plenty that has been written. I can't even put all the books out that are coming out. As you know, people jump on any hot topic and try to get published right away. So there's plenty of books out there you could read more about that. I do know that Ryan Anderson's book in the middle here that says When Harry Became Salad got banned from Amazon. So you'll have to see where you can get that. I can't remember where you can get that, but just look it up. I'm sure he's found a way to still make that available, but I know Amazon did ban that book. No shock there. Anyway, okay, there's one other. Oh yeah, these. Let me mention one thing. These two books on the right, in the middle here, by Carl Trueman, "The Rise and Triumph of Modern Self," of the Modern Self. That is a. If you want to see where we got to where we are today, with everything, that's the book to get. That's a long book, but if you really want to see people like, well, how do we get to this point? Well, that's what you need to read. Now he's written a shorter version of it, and the one to the far right, Strange New World, he's kind of downsized it a little bit. But those two books are really important because they definitely go over the history of, it didn't just like suddenly we just decided transgenderism was the greatest thing since sliced bread. It just happened yesterday. I mean, this has all been coming through the years. It's been a buildup of what happened several decades ago. So you can read those two books. Or any of these other ones, of course. But anyway. All right. Well, there's no doubt in the news we have seen more than enough stories about the transgender issue. Of course, the Leah Thomas situation, the swimmer, who has now won all kinds of events. I think we've probably heard about that. Maybe you haven't. I hope you have. If you haven't, unless you just never watch the news or just don't care, I don't know. But he is now identifying as a female swimmer. And so he's the competition, he's competing in events. And it's a big controversy, of course. That's just one story of many. Actress Ellen Page, I saw her years ago in a movie called Inception, which was an exceptionally good movie. I enjoyed that movie immensely, but she transitioned into a boy, as you can see here. Somebody's volume is on. Just a second. Okay, not anymore. Okay. Yeah, you got to mute yourself, or I'm going to mute you when you come in. If you come into the call, unmute it. I will mute you. Thank you. Anyway, let's move on here. Anyway, just 1 second here. I think someone is coming in. Oh boy, just give me a second here. I think I saw someone coming in the call. There we go, Jose. Okay, let's go back. All right. Anyway, actress Ellen Page is another one. One of many, but fine actress, by the way. And but she has done this to herself, as you can see. So she no longer is Ellen Page. Yeah. So that's happening quite a bit. And then we have, of course, people in the current administration serving there. Rachel Levine, United States Assistant Secretary of Health. That was her before and after. So I think we all know about that, unless you don't know anything about that. But anyway, and then you have someone new, the deputy assistant of energy. He doesn't even call himself a he or a she; it's a they. So anyway, that is what is part of President Biden's administration. They are part of it. I say they because they won't use he or she. So anyway, I think it's a he, so I'm going to go with a he, but that's what they're referring to themselves as a they. Anyway, so a lot's been going on very quickly, a lot of changes, as we probably know. If you ever want to see, there's a documentary by Matt Walsh. I think it's out now. It's called What is a Woman? Matt Walsh is a conservative writer. He also has a book out on the topic. But he did a huge documentary, toured around the world asking people, what is a woman? And basically, it's it's quite telling the answers he get. He can't get an answer out of a lot of people. So I think we probably know with the Supreme Court nominee, they asked her what a woman is, and we all know what she said. She didn't give a straight answer on that. So that's a really interesting documentary. You'd have to rent it, I think, on Amazon or wherever. I don't know. You can find it. But there's also a book on it. So interesting times we live in, no doubt about it. Now, I don't know if we know this, where we're at or things that have transpired, but of course, the current administration signed an executive order to allow students, or to mandate public schools to allow students who identify as transgender to use the restrooms and locker rooms of their choice. That means if your daughter is in a public restroom in school, a guy can walk in who identifies as a girl right in front of her, obviously, or vice versa. My kids are not public schooled, so I don't have to worry about that, but some do. Many schools of course, have begun to allow boys who transition or say they're transgender to compete in girls' sports, as we know, and vice versa. That's been happening. And sadly enough, some schools are forbidding teachers from alerting parents that their child is asked to be referred to by a different name or sex. So what's been happening really is they're encouraging some schools to allow kids to explore their gender at a very early age, and then not allowing the parent to know about it. In one school in Canada, I believe, there's a story of a guy in Canada, a dad whose daughter came home from school. I think she was under the age of 8, and she said she was a boy now, and he said, no, you're not. And I think he got into it, and he was put in jail, I think, or something, for trying to interfere with her gender. So they are teaching transgender education very early. I have a friend of mine who had a daughter in the 7th grade in a local school where I'm at, and she came home and said she was a boy now, identifies as a boy. My friend called the school, and they said that we encourage them, whatever gender they want to pick. She proceeded to pull her child out of the school. Now she's taking online classes. So, the schools are definitely a problem. And that comes down from the current administration. Obviously, it's tied in with the current administration. So if you think you can divorce the two, you're not aware of what's going on. It probably will not get any better. Parents, of course, have spoken up. There's a lot of parents who are very upset. You can go online and watch them in front of their school board speaking out about it, telling, school boards, you should be teaching math and other things to my kids, not teaching them about gender at their age. They're too early to understand this. And not to mention, if you're actually telling them they can switch genders, or they should switch genders and be encouraged to switch genders, it's that early of an age without telling the parents is absolutely ludicrous. It's lunacy. It's insanity. So, there's a big problem with that. Some places that's going on in certain places. It's like Stephen Levine said here in this article. He says here that if you want to try to encourage your child, if a school tries to encourage a child to change their gender without parental consent, look at the consequences. He says therapy for young children encourages transition cannot be considered to be neutral, but instead is an experimental procedure that has a high likelihood of changing the life path of the child with highly unpredictable effects on mental and physical health, suicidal issues, and life expectancy. So, they've shown gender reassignment surgery is not always the best thing to do. Actually, in most cases, it's not. It has lifelong effects, of course, mentally, emotionally, physically. and sometimes it leads to suicide. So that's just something that a child cannot choose to do, without the picking your gender, thinking about it without your parents being involved is ludicrous. But that's where you're at. That's where we're at. And so if you want to complain, look at your legislator. I mean, look at who you're voting for. Look at the some of the issues that are going on in your schools, obviously. But there's no doubt the million of our neighbors now believe, not as a result of rational thought, because rationality has gone out the door in our country, but as an intuition they've caught somehow growing up around them. Right now in this culture, human beings obviously can sculpt themselves into whatever they desire. They can use hormones, surgery, legislation, whatever they want. They can just make their own reality and be whatever they want to be. And that's what a lot of people are believing now. And probably because we're absolutely infatuated with equality and human rights, that if you tell someone they can't do it, they're going to say you're trampling on their rights. And, who are you to tell someone that they can't be a boy? Or who do you tell them if they want to be a girl? You can't tell them they can't be anything. They have rights. And who are you to try to interfere with that, right? So these are the kinds of things that are going on. No doubt about it. If you look Tumblr, if you look up that website, they list 114 different gender options. Being gender fluid, that refers to people that can move back and forth on a gender spectrum. They could identify as a guy one day or 1 week and go back to a female for 2 weeks and switch back and forth or something else. We do know that my children are part of Gen Z. Some are part of Gen Y, millennials, and we know this is what they're being raised in, what they've been kind of the culture that they've been surrounded with, the gender fluid generation. This was not around when I was growing up. I'm 53. I was in the 80s. None of this stuff was around, obviously. Probably you know that as well if you're my age or maybe a little younger. It wasn't an issue, but it's certainly an issue in a much deeper way now, and it's all over the place. If you go to this website, this is a women's college, Mount Holyoke or Holyoke College in Massachusetts, Holyoke. According to this website, it admits people who want to identify in all these different areas. You can be born a certain way, but you can identify as all these other things. There's a bunch of them on their website, so that's interesting. No, it's not interesting. It's sad, but it's true. So anyway, if you're not looking at this stuff and you're not saying to yourself that there has to be a different world than this that we've been created to be in, that this is not the world that should be the way it should be. It's out of order. It's not normal. It's not in sync. It's not with what the creation was supposed to be. Then you're probably in line with what C.S. Lewis said, when he said, if I find in myself desires, there's nothing else that can satisfy. The only logical explanation was made for another world. And I think we all know, hopefully, if you have no longing for a better place and you don't have that desire in your heart, and that you're really aliens on this earth, as the Bible says, this isn't where we truly belong. We're going to be in a new heavens, new earth with resurrected bodies one day. That if you don't long for that at all, then something's wrong. But this kind of stuff just shows how out of order things have really become, out of sync, and how it's so off. The fall has definitely impacted so many things, and so we are way off base as far as where we're headed. So, the questions we need to ask ourselves, some people have decided when it comes to transgender topic, should we just let others fight the battle? Should we stay out of it? Should we not talk about it? It's sensitive. I don't want to say anything. I don't know what to do. I don't want to look like a transphobia person. Just remember that if we want to maintain our credibility, when we talk about Jesus and who he is, that he died and rose from the dead, that's a claim based in reality. Remember, everything we say about reality matters. All the Christian worldview says about reality matters. You can't separate certain things and be like, well, one kind of matters over here. Well, that doesn't matter over there. Well, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I can just talk about this one thing and nobody cares. You can't really lie about our created bodies and how we're talking about, we have a truth claim that transcends our physical bodies, right? And we also have a truth claim that our physical bodies will be resurrected one day. And so obviously we have things to say about reality, and our worldview does speak to all of reality. Now, I'm not talking about that maybe you're not called to be like a Ryan Anderson who writes books on transgenderism and others, and that's your main focus here. I understand that, but to not even talk about it at all and be afraid to say anything is just, you got to think about this, about what you believe about your worldview. Does it speak to all of reality, and are you able to talk about and speak the truth in love? And maybe you need more equipping on it. That's fine. That's what we're here for. And I'm not an expert. Nobody's a total expert except people like Ryan Anderson, some of those other guys who wrote those books. But we should have some understanding so we can talk to people about it. And today, there's no doubt that what's trendy is being confused. Confusion is in. It's the in thing. If you're confused about sexuality and identity, you're awesome. You can't say you have any certainty about those things, because if you do, you're intolerant. You can be viewed as bigoted or arrogant or oppressive. If you actually say you have certainty about the nature of reality about gender or sexuality or identity, that's just impossible, right? You have to say, the trendy thing is to say, we just don't know what gender. We don't know we just can't know about that. We can't nail that down. Okay. And that is very unfortunate, but that's where we are at. And there's no doubt that the culture is obsessed with happiness. Americans are obsessed with happiness, which we have been for a long time, as J.P. Moreland writes about in his book, Lost Virtue of Happiness. Most people don't even know what they mean by happiness, because happiness is a fleeting feeling that comes and goes based on circumstances. If your circumstances are going well, you're happy. If they're not going good, you're not happy. But we absolutely obsessed with happiness. And people that interfere with people that want to change gender or identify something else is viewed as trampling on someone's happiness. And since the goal is to be happy, and if someone's identity is in their gender, if you try to interfere with that, you're viewed as a bigot and you're viewed as a terrible person. So those are the days we live in. Okay, no doubt about it. Sadly, remember, as I'll talk more about this, how to talk about this towards the end, that transgender ideology really falsely proclaims the specifics of our physical bodies don't matter. There's a confusion, obviously, that if you're not creating the image of God, that's going to play a huge role in this debate. We're creating the image of God, and our body is a part of God's design. I'll talk more about the implications of separating the mind from the body, as transgender, the whole movement does. They have a separation between what they feel or what they think in their mind, psychology, versus their body, which is causing a big problem. Remember, sometimes confuse the transgender and homosexuality issue. Obviously, sometimes they're included in the entire LGBT thing, LGBTQ, whatever, LGBT, I'm sorry. But obviously some people can identify as transgender, may also consider themselves heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, polysexual, asexual, whatever. As you know, it's a free-for-all. You pick whatever you want, okay? Now, remember one thing, there's something called intersex that does happen. That's where someone who's born where their sex is a little bit ambiguous, looking at the genitalia. These are very, very rare cases, about 1 in every 5,000. It's true that happens, but that's not a reason to act like the gender is just this free for all, right? We don't know. People are born intersex and we can't tell. Yeah, that's a very, very, very small percentage. Okay, and you cannot use that as an argument to try to argue that people can now, the gender's fluid and we can pick our own gender. Okay, that's not a good argument. All right. But if you really want to know what's happening, where we got to where we are, it's all really a result of postmodernism. If you haven't studied postmodernism, I encourage you to, because philosophically speaking, that is really in the worldview, from a worldview perspective, this is really what's behind a lot of this, that everything is just kind of a social construct now. Okay. If you study postmodernism, a large part of postmodernism, there's something called deconstructionism. Okay. And that's where what you do is you deconstruct things that are ideological biases, things that are things like gender, racial issues, economic, political, cultural, everything, traditional things that we believe in that are based in objective reality, things that we've had for decades and decades, things we can know, certain categories and things. And they just basically, what they do is they deconstruct them to the point where everything just becomes a free for all. You make up your own gender and you come up with your own view of everything. Okay. So there is no objective truth on anything. There is no certainty on anything. And it's all deconstructed. And so what happens is people who look at when you study postmodernism, you look at gender studies, a lot of people who look at the world in the lens of gender studies, especially if you're on college campuses or elsewhere, but those things impact the culture at large. They claim that society has forced men and women to social constructs, okay, social constructs of gender. And so really gender theorists, what they say is social categories for men and women that have been used to distinguish between men and women throughout decades have no basis in reality. There's no objective standard for gender, and everything, from clothing to sexuality is really just someone's personal preference. It's based on the individual's experience. Okay. So maleness or masculinity is shaped by cultural forces. It's a choice as to his gender made for him by his parents. He's in infancy, your parents just are the ones that picked it for you. But as you get older, you realize that this is part of a social construct, and you can form your own ideas what gender is, and you can just be whatever you want to be. It's based on your preference and experience. And that is really what postmodernism does. So when it comes to postmodernism, you are the starting point, the I, okay? It's not God, it's I. You obviously construct your own moral values and moral duties. You construct your own identity. You construct your own purpose and meaning and truth, which is subjective. You or society will determine what has value, dignity, and rights. God is, if you want to start in this model, you really are the starting point of everything. And it's very subjective. Okay. Look at what Louis Marcus says here. He teaches at Houston Baptist Seminary. He says here, one major part of the agenda that the feminists have been successful in forcing in most society is the replacement of the word sex with the word gender in most academic journals, and all of those interminable forms that our bureaucratic society calls on us to fill out. The word sex is rejected because it suggests an essential link between the bodies and souls of men and women. The jargon word gender does not bring with the same connotation. In fact, the word gender, used this way, suggests that masculinity and femininity are not essential traits of social constructs. So it is true that they have gotten away from the word sex, obviously, and just focused on gender. And what we believe, sex is obviously a biological and bodily reality, and gender is a social expression of that reality. But what we have today is what's happening is gender is separated from bodily reality. It can now mean anything you choose it to mean. And that's what's happening as a result of postmodernism. Okay. So what's happening, you kind of have a couple other categories here. There's something we call biological essentialism and psychological extensionalism. Or essentialism, I'm sorry. That should be essentialism, not extensionalism. But biological essentialism basically says that a person's gender is determined by the objective fact of their biological sex. And when there's a mismatch, subjectivity should be helped to yield to objectivity, not the other way around. And then psychological essentialism says the objective facts of biology don't determine gender identity. It's basically more focused on psychology, what your psychology tells you what your gender is. So it's your subjective perception of gender, right? Not much to do with biology anymore, okay? So I'm sorry, that should be psychological essentialism, not existentialism. Now, it is true that we have people around us that experience gender dysphoria. That's a real thing. And that's where people are unhappy with their biological sex and they're having a conflict in their psychology with their body. There's a conflict there between what they're thinking and feeling versus what their body is what their body is. Okay. And in some cases, they think that if they switched or lived as a member of the opposite sex, they'd be more truly themselves. And in some cases, as neither male or female, just pick a category called other. Like I said before, maybe just identify as other or they. Sometimes this is a feeling that is strong over time. It's sometimes, as someone says, feeling trapped in the wrong body. I had a guy years ago that said to me in my old neighborhood, he said, some people are just, they just are having a hard time because they don't have the right, their mind doesn't match their body, or they don't feel like they have the right body. So yeah, gender dysphoria is a real thing. Until 2013, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual Mental Disorders, 4th edition, used the term gender identity disorder, but there's other cases where someone's feelings contradict the physical reality of their body. Now, the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual Mental Disorders in 2013 says gender dysphoria refers to the distress that may accompany the incongruence between one's experienced or expressed gender and one's assigned gender. So we are encountering some people, you're going to be around them that experience gender dysphoria, no doubt. Mark Yarhouse, he wrote this book called Understanding Gender Dysphoria. He's a Christian writer. He says in his book, he doesn't know what really causes it. He thinks it may be the result of the fall of man. Just like some people have, we talked about last week, they have certain desires towards same-sex relations. Some of this is the fallout of the fallout of the fall of man. The question becomes whether whatever's happened here, whatever gender dysphoria they're experiencing, whether the distortion, has a genetic, hormonal, psychological, or physiological, psychological, or spiritual cause, can it be overcome through the gospel? Now, some people experience gender dysphoria at an early age. They have shown statistically come out of that later on. Like they have, have this struggle in the early years. It goes away as they get older sometimes. So it doesn't always mean that they're just stuck with it for life. Okay. So a lot of them do come around and it's just something that passes in some cases. Okay. But it is a real thing and we need to be understanding. We can wholeheartedly agree that we want to help people who have this problem. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't do that. All I can do is offer the gospel. But there's no doubt we need to have empathy for these people and be compassionate. I don't know who here has dealt with this with someone, but I do think there's no doubt that some of the people we're seeing in our culture that are flaunting, identifying as something else, suddenly coming out and saying, I now identify as this or that. I don't think it's because of gender dysphoria. I think they just want to do it. I think it's trendy. I think it's a hip thing. I think they're getting a lot of attention from it. I'm not saying everybody. I'm just saying that I do think that some people are doing it for the wrong reasons. And it's kind of a hip thing to just suddenly say you identify as this and you won't be identifying as a he or she. You want to be trendy and have like 6 different pronouns that describe yourself. And it's celebrated, of course. It's being celebrated. So it just depends on the person. I don't know. Everybody's going to have different reasons for why this is happening. Remember, though, that biblically speaking, we're a psychosomatic unity, meaning that we're physical, spiritual, mental creatures. If one is off, everything else is going to be off. If you're not well spiritually, you're not going to be well mentally. You're not going to be well physically. If you're not well physically, you're not going to be well spiritually. You're not going to be well mentally. If you're not well over here, you're not going to be well over there. It's all holistic, okay? So sin has corrupted all these things, right? It's corrupted our bodies. It's corrupted our mental state. It's corrupted our spiritual state. And that's why every day we strive to be renewed and to try to live as new creations in Christ, right? We have to understand our positional identity. We have to believe our identity has to sink into our hearts. We have to take our identity from the Lord every day, not from an American dream identity where if we're not living out the American dream perfectly, we're a failure. That, you know, you're born, you go to college, you make a ton of money, you get married, have a bunch of kids, retire, and die. And if you don't meet those standards, then you're a loser. So that's not what the Bible teaches. Okay. Now, remember that when God made us, you know, he obviously made humanity in male, female forms. They're not biblically, as we know, male and female self-conception are not constructed from psychology alone, right? Male and female are biblical realities, I'm sorry, they're biblical, with a biblical portrait, they're fixed bodily realities. And they're not interchangeable, obviously, biblically speaking, okay? So one of the things we have to do in this conversation, really, when we're talking to people about this issue, you know what it kind of really boils down to? It's back to a worldview issue. I don't know how anybody could believe that if someone's created an image and likeness of God and believes that the creation account is trustworthy and true, maybe you don't, I don't know, but I'm talking about someone that doesn't. If this is your worldview right here, that you are a cosmic accident and you came here through chance and time and we just got lucky, and you came from an undirected natural process, you're nothing but a material being, you're just a like I said, you're just a cosmic accident. If God does not exist and we come from purposeless evolution, and we just go back to dust and death, and you know the goal is to propagate the species, the whole universe is purposeless, we're purposeless, we're just here to survive and be happy, and then we just die and go back to dust and death. If that's what you believe, then yeah, I can see why you totally think gender is fluid. I can see why you don't care about the body. I can see why you would have all kinds of social constructs for everything, if that's your worldview. You know, whatever your worldview is, the question is who gets to be God and is man the measure of all things? In our culture right now, as far as what's going on with gender, it seems like man is the measure of all things on that issue, because basically there are no binding rules on anything. Sexuality and gender are a matter of personal will and preference. That's what's going on in our culture today. It's got nothing to do with God. I mean, God is not the starting point here, and man is the measure of all things. So that's just where we are at. Excuse me one second. Getting something that's happening here. So that's, I think we're at. You have to ask people what their worldview is in this area. You've got to ask them, you know, what is your worldview? What do you believe about how we get here? Is there a creator? All that stuff that has to come up in the conversation. Now, if they say God made me a male and I want to be a female, then if it's a gender dysphoria issue, that's a mental, psychological problem that we can address through the gospel. But if they're insisting that God made them a male or female and now he wants them to be something else, then obviously they're off. I mean, there's something mental, there's something spiritually going wrong there, but obviously there's something way off in their reasoning skills. And the fall, of course, has impacted that as well. So like I said, the culture says your psychology is your sexual identity, let your body be conformed to it. We say your body is your sexual identity, let your mind be conformed to it. That's cited in Sam Albury's book, Transgender. Now, a really good book that addresses some of these issues are the book Love Thy Body. It's by Nancy Pearcey. She's a female apologist that teaches at Houston Baptist. But you know, what we're really having a problem with, like I said, is we're having this dualism, this detachment from mind and body. It's just split in two. It's like my body's over here Yeah, I've got my body, but my mind's over here, and my mind rules over my body. My mind tells me what's reality. My mind tells me I'm this, but my body tells me this. And they just split them in half. Where, of course, we believe biblically we are a holistic being, that we don't just make this huge dichotomy between the two. Yes, we have some kind of dualism, to the extent that we believe that if we die, if you believe you have a soul, the soul can separate from the body and go be with God temporarily till you get your resurrection body. Some Christians don't believe that, but a lot of them do. But the point is that the transgender community are making a huge detachment, huge from the body, from the mind. Um, a biblical worldview on this issue. Let's look at a biblical worldview on gender and sexuality. So sexuality refers to God's anthropological design and pattern for the procreative relationship between male and female. Gender refers to biological differences in male and female embodiment and the different cultural ways in which the creational distinctions between male and female are manifested. So, it's important that we define those correctly. It's not that culture plays no role at all, but it's not the primary thing, okay, that we're talking about here. Gender can also have broad and narrow connotations. Broadly, gender refers to biological differences in male and female embodiment. And narrowly speaking, gender refers to a creational distinction between male and female manifested in cultures, such as, we have baby girls wearing pink, baby boys adorned in blue, baby girls adorned in pink. Those are some cultural issues, right? We know that. One thing you may want to try in your conversations with people, again, like I said last week, in talking about same-sex relations, you may want to remember natural law again, that does not appeal to the Bible. You don't need to open up the Bible to know, if you look around the created order, the natural world, that we see a certain telos, what we call a teleological goal. Sometimes we talk about teleological arguments, the design arguments. We see things are created for an end goal, a purpose, like the universe had an end goal, the aim of the universe, the goal of the universe was so that life could get going on Earth, right? It has to be set up a certain way. Natural law, when you ask what I should do, you basically answer the question by asking, what is natural? What does the natural world tell us? What do things display in the natural? What is their natural goal or aim or purpose? Okay. So this will be some good books that are written about natural law theory. If you want to get some of these by the same author, it'll be in your PDF when you get it. But like I said last week, if you want to take a glue stick and buy it at the store and use it to sniff glue to get high or have some sort of rush, whatever it is that really the intended purpose of a glue stick, right? Of course not. I mean, that's not the intended goal of a glue stick. We know what a glue stick is used for. That's not the purpose, okay? So if you misuse that glue stick and keep sniffing it up your nose, eventually you're going to have a problem, right? Because that's not the goal or purpose of that glue stick. And so our bodies have a certain telos, a goal or aim, right? There's an end goal. You can see what they're designed to do, okay? That our bodies express our sexuality, and our biological sex is rooted in chromosomal differences that cannot be changed by surgery, and that our feelings can, and obviously our feelings can be a poor indicator of truth. So, that's something that's, like I said last week, in the same sex argument, that, two men and two women cannot procreate. Their bodies are not designed to do that. They don't have the aim or goal. That's not the aim or goal or purpose of their bodies to do what they're doing. And if you want to try to have a child, they can't. That's why they're not designed to do that. I mean, that's why we see the end result. So that, and they don't need the Bible, obviously, to figure that much out. So the longer we want to try to make reality conform to what we want it to be rather than what it is, eventually we will reap the consequences. So that is probably what is happening, where people want to make reality what they think it is. They can make reality what they want it to be. They can make gender into what they want it to be. It's their opinion, their social construct, their they identify whatever they want. It's totally a social construct, and eventually it's going to bite back at them because that's what reality does. It already is, by the way. I don't know if you know this, if people have reassignment surgery, how the long-term ramifications of that have shown. It can lead to suicide. It can lead to all kinds of problems. Obviously, it changes your body forever. Never really a positive thing. Okay. So anyway, we'll have to see what happens. But remember that when we think of gender and sexuality in Scripture as a design that all humans are obligated to live within, remember that just like I said last week of trying to be celibate as a gay person, just like you're have a gender issue, struggling with that, even though it can be hard, it doesn't just go away. Just because it's hard, it doesn't mean the truth is not there, right? If you say to yourself, well, I don't feel this way and I'm going to go by how I feel and it's just hard. Well, yeah, it's hard. That's Christianity is hard, as I said last week. And we need to understand that we need to express to people that it's not always easy to follow God's design. If we go by our desires, as I said last week, our desires, if we just go by our desires and live out every desire we have, we destroy ourselves, right? I may desire today to eat 6 dark chocolate Hershey bars, but I know that's not good for me. I like one like maybe once a week though. But, we, following the commands of God and trying to live within God's parameters isn't always easy. And, so we need to understand that. And also, this issue about what we believe about sexuality and gender is not an in-house argument for debate among Christians only. These are realities. Gender and sexuality as creational realities are the foundation for a organized society, for society to exist, a society to prosper, a society to live and flourish, right? So, if you think it only pertains to an in-house debate, I think you're wrong. I think it's a public debate. And I think that this issue is going to enter the public square more and more as the days go on. And obviously, we know right now that it's not getting better. For right now, if you take a stance that you don't say gender's fluid, you don't support someone as far as wanting to switch genders, you're viewed as having transphobia or something. One thing also I would agree that we do need to do, we don't want to make it too easy. Like, you don't want to respond too simplistically and just be like, if you're struggling with the transgender issue and you're trying to minister them, you don't just spout out, well, God made you male and female and find your identity in the Lord and that's it. You've got to go over that in a little deeper detail. Okay. You've got to spend some time on that. There's no doubt that people find their identity in a lot of these things. I call them like not the core identity you have, but some of the secondary identities or third level identities. But all these identities are supposed to be submitted to our core identity, which is being an image bearer of God. Things such as your ethnicity, your nationality, your culture, your gender, your sexuality, your physical and mental capacities, where you came from in your family, your age, your relationships, your occupation, your possessions, your faith. I mean, not your faith, I'm sorry, but your personality, character, your political affiliations. All those things to be subjected to your core identity, which is an image bearer of God and also new creation in Christ. And I agree that if you run into somebody that's finding their core identity in their gender, you could take it back again. Like I said, next week, you could mention to them that, once again, you could talk about identity and say, you know what? I'm wondering about identity because, for me, I find my core identity as an image bearer of God, and being a male is not my core identity. Yes, it's one characteristic of me. It's one of my identities, but it's not the core thing. Just like all these other things, and you can talk to them about how if they find their identity as an image bearer of God, you have to look at how God created them and why they're disagreeing with their creator. Now, if they don't believe in God, then you're going to have to go into If they believe they're a purposeless accident, which I talked about before, then obviously it's a worldview issue. You're going to have to maybe carve out some issues. Why do you think God exists, and go over some apologetic stuff. But the reality is some people are just going to want to do what they want to do. And remember this about not if, the issue of confusion about what a male and female is, not being able to say we know. If we don't know what a male and female is, how do people want to go through sexual or gender reassignment surgery? How can they go through reassignment surgery if they don't know what a male and female is, right? It doesn't make any sense. You have to know what a male and female is biologically. Otherwise, you wouldn't even want to go through that process. If you want to become a male and have male genitalia or cut off your breasts or go through that whole thing, you have to have some idea what a male and female is biologically. But then if you say biology doesn't define you or doesn't determine gender, well, this person went through reassignment surgery and they had to know what a guy is, biologically speaking, to go through that process. Same with this person. Okay. So it's really confusing and it's really problematic that we say that we can't say what a male and female is biologically. That's not the basis for gender, but yet we're willing to allow people and push them to transition into that because we know what a male and female is biologically. See? So we're living in a day, like I said, it's really hard to have rational engagement these days. And you can blame that on social media. People just go on social media. They're dumbed down by social media. True, that's happened. Or else they just, we live in a very emotional-based culture where people can't think anymore. They just go by their feelings or emotions. There's a whole list of things where we've gotten to, why we've gotten to this place. So we're going to have to have some tools and equipping and ability to minister to people who are struggling with this. I can't say that I've had to minister to a ton of people in this background. I've certainly had to do with the gay topic more than this, but this is going to be a topic in the future. Now, let me address one last thing. I know there's a mixed reaction to whether you should address the person by their preferred pronoun. I know that's been debated. Some Christians will not do that. I know that a Christian teacher got suspended from a school because he refused to address his student by their preferred pronoun. I think he won the court case from what I remember. I think it was in Ohio. You're going to have to decide what you want to do with that based on your conscience. If you are compelled that you think that you're by letting them be addressed as their preferred pronoun when it doesn't match their biological state, if you think that you need to do that and you feel comfortable with that and you think that God is led you to do that, then I can't stop you from doing that. You're going to have to do whatever your conscience leads you to do. Some people won't do that. Some people will. Some people don't want to put a barrier before the transgender person, because if you start fighting with them over their preferred pronoun, that's going to prevent more conversations in the future because you cut them off there. You've already shut them down and they're not going to want to talk to you about future issues. So some people go ahead and cave and address them by their preferred pronoun because they want to have future conversations with them and be able to minister to them and build a relationship with them. So that's one argument. You're just going to have to figure it out, what you want to do with that. And I know some people will not budge on that and they'll take the hit. But, I just want to emphasize one last thing I said at the beginning that is extremely important. We're going to have to really decide if our worldview speaks to all of reality. Does it just speak to like heaven? Oh, we die, we go to heaven. That's all that matters, just get to heaven. Or do we think that our worldview speaks to the realities that are all around us every day? Does it speak to moral issues? Does it speak to psychological issues? Does it speak to political issues? Does it speak to ethical issues? And the list goes on. If we just only have a worldview that all that matters is we just get our souls saved and go to heaven, then really you have a very, very narrow worldview and it's not really addressing anything around you. Okay, and the problem is our worldview does address all those issues. We just need to know how to communicate it and use it. All right, so excuse me, I'm going to stop there, and someone's already directed me. Okay, sorry, someone's emailed me. Yeah, so I will turn off